Good day, friends, and welcome once again to Voice of the Colonies. I am Mercy Otis Warren, here to share the news of this week of December 7th through 13th, 1775. The greatest undertaking of the season now comes from the frozen wilderness between New York and New England. Colonel Henry Knox, charged by General Washington with bringing the captured cannon of Fort Ticonderoga to Boston, has become a very perilous stage of his journey. This week, Knox reports that the guns, almost 60 pieces of heavy iron and bronze, have been loaded onto massive sledges and drawn to the head of Lake George. Ox teams were straining against the frozen grounds to move the artillery, but now Colonel Knox is working to move the artillery across the lake itself. He'll be using a combination of boats and sledges. There's ice forming, but many areas are still watery and the boats can move across. Men have been testing the surface with poles and the cracks groan beneath some of the iron, but Knox writes confidently that patience and perseverance will triumph over all obstacles. Now, should he succeed, Washington will at last possess the thunder needed to break the stalemate at Boston. All of New England now watches the North with hope sharpened by winter wind. From Virginia comes news that warms the coldest hearth. On December 9th, at the narrow causeway of Great Bridge, Patriot forces under Colonel William Woodford won a swift and decisive victory over Lord Dunmore's troops. Redcoats, Loyalists, and the company of enslaved men he promised freedom for taking up the king's arms. The British advanced at dawn, but the Virginians held their fire until the enemy was near, and then rifles spoke. Within minutes, the attack collapsed. British forces fled back toward Norfolk, leaving the Patriots in firm command of the mainland. Now, this triumph has electrified the colony. Where caution once prevailed, conviction now rises. In taverns and drawing rooms, men say that Virginia has now crossed a threshold from which she will not step back. Norfolk itself is tense but jubilant. Patriot forces have entered the town, though British ships still brood in the harbor. Warehouse fires smolder, and rumors whisper that Lord Dunmore will soon return with vengeance from the sea. Further north, up the St. Lawrence, the siege of Quebec tightens. Generals Montgomery and Arnold, their combined forces fewer than 1,000 men strong, and many weakened by frost and hunger, keep their watch upon the city walls. Now, snow is waist deep in the roads. Scaling ladders are prepared, and Montgomery urges his men to be ready should the storm of war break before Christmas. Inside the city, Governor Carleton strengthens his defenses and calls the Canadian militia to posts along the ramparts. Both sides know the next few weeks may seal the fate of the Northern campaign. In Massachusetts, Washington's army endures another week of bitter cold, keeping Boston under siege. Soldiers build huts of timber and clay. The roofs sag under heavy snow. Ink freezes in its wells, powder cakes in the barrels, and bread must be split with a hatchet. Yet their letters home remain steady in spirit with sentences like, "We are poor in comfort, but rich in cause." Inside Boston, the British fare little better. They have cramped quarters, worsening sickness, and dwindling supplies. Even officers admit that winter itself may prove a harsher foe than any American rifleman. In Philadelphia, Congress celebrates the Southern victory and continues the great labor of shaping a nation. Naval regulations have been drafted, designs for a common ensign discussed, and Commodore Essex Hopkins prepares to lead the first fleet of American vessels against British supply lines and Caribbean storehouses. Though small, this navy represents a new chapter. The war is no longer confined to fields and forests, but it now spreads upon the sea. Delegates in New Hampshire are drafting a temporary government frame to be chosen by the people rather than royal command, a sign of what may soon become the first new constitution in America. Across the land, winter deepens. Roads drift shut. Rivers crust with ice, firewood grows scarce, prices for flour and molasses soar. Yet the people rise to meet the hardship. Connecticut families are creative, baking bread from pumpkin and cornmeal. In Pennsylvania, candles are traded for very hard-to-find salt. Households improvise, they adapt, and they endure. Each sacrifice a quiet pledge to the cause. And so, this week ends with victory in the South, vigilance in the North, endurance in New England, and the steady shaping of a people determined to be free. From the icy lake where Knox moves his cannon to the smoking bridge at Norfolk, the same truth rings clear. Winter deepens, but hope burns brighter. Until next week, my friends, I remain your faithful correspondent, Mercy Otis Warren. And if you enjoyed this journey into the past, please tap like and subscribe so we can keep telling these stories together.